This is the Super Rad BMX Podcast. Down the first straight is the cruising Cornhusker over the jump bonsai Brad. Now your host Brad Fanshaw and Tim Lillethorup.
You're listening to the big episode number 1 of the Super Rad BMX Podcast. I'm Brad Fanshaw.
I'm Tim Lillethorup.
You know what? Tim and I want this to be your source for vintage BMX, BMX history, ABA stories. How about some NBL stories and some NBA stories, racing, riding, and we're going to have some killer interviews.
And we want it to be your source for all things vintage BMX, mid-school BMX, new school BMX, and freestyle.
That's right, man. You know what? When Tim and I came up with this idea to do the Super Rad BMX podcast, the very first thing was, what do we call it? And Tim and I were throwing around names like the BMX podcast, or how about Rad, or how about, oh, wait a minute. How about Super Rad BMX Podcast? We both agreed that would just bring everything together because, you know, remember in the movie Super Bad, the dude rode a BMX bike. And then what movie is the first movie that everybody thought really said BMX? What was it, Tim?
Rad, the movie Rad. People watch it every year. They get together now in groups every year in theaters all across the country, and there's like a huge following of people that watch that, you know, and go to the theaters, and you know, it's a party.
That's right, man, and that's why we thought Super Rad BMX Podcast. So you know what? I'm going to tell you right now that we have our Instagram page is already up. It's called Super Rad BMX. So follow us there. We'll bring it up again later in the show, but follow us at Super Rad BMX on Instagram. And you know what? You can send us messages there, DM us, tell us what you think of the name, tell us what you think of the show. And you know what? I think you're going to be surprised on who we bring on, some of the things that we have. And we thank you for listening because you know what? This is how the show will grow. Don't forget, and we're going to remind you enough, that you have to go to iTunes, go to the podcast on iTunes, find Super Rad BMX Podcast, and like us and give us a 5-star rating. You don't know how much that means to us, but it also means the show's going to survive because if you follow us, that's a subscription. It's free, but then it also, that 5-star rating and a comment, even if it's rad, that's all you got to say. It pops us up in the ratings with iTunes, and that's what, you know, really means a lot to us. So do that for us. And of course, you'll be able to find the show on all of the other podcast carriers. And we're just putting all that together right now, but you'll be able to find it everywhere when we're done with it, because Tim is a media guy, man. He's the dude who is out there filming and writing and producing commercials, but he knows how to do this, and that's what's going to be really cool. And my company, Bonspeed Media, has 2 other podcasts, Shift and Steer if you're into cars, and Man Seeks Adventure if you're into cars, bars, and adventures. Hey, Tim, I thought we would talk a little bit about why we thought, you know, there's a lot of other podcasts out there now, a lot of them that we listen to and we dig. What are some of the
really, really good ones? What's that?
Do you listen to any on a regular basis? And what are they?
I do. I listen to, I think it's All Things BMX Show. There's Lane 8 podcast. And of course, Dirty Knobs podcast. You know, they're coming out with a new one again this week. And that's also on YouTube. And it's great. You know, the stories, the old school stories. Some of the other podcasts, occasionally they'll get an old school guy on there. And a lot of times they interview people that are involved with the sport now, but it's very informational. You know, you and I have been talking about doing this for going way back, we've been talking about doing things like this long before the internet even evolved. But we've talked about a podcast for years, and I'm just excited that we're getting this one off the ground. And we've got a list of people. It's going to be fun.
I was just going to say that. I was just going to say, recently I went to the, and we're going to talk about this later on the show, but I went to the NBA Racers reunion event, and
right.
It was so far away. Hey, if you live on the north side of LA, it wasn't far away, but I live down near.
It's in your backyard.
Beach. Woo! But listen to some of the people that I lined up, and they already committed to coming on the new podcast here. Tracer Finn, how about that? CW rider, great guy.
Gotta love Tracer. I love me some Tracer Finn.
That's right. How about Jeff Utterback?
I don't think I've seen him on a podcast. So that.
Have you heard him on one?
Well,
that was a trick question. No,
question.
Utterback's cool because of his GJS days, his racing on FMF, SE. But not only that, for me, being a car guy, his vintage drag racing. We talk about vintage drag racing all the time because he knows that I've got my vintage dragster, and he asks why I've never brought it out, and because I don't have as big a cojones as he does, it's
I don't think I've seen Jeff since, I don't know, we had a reunion in Rockford, Illinois, maybe 2002. We had a vintage show.
That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was jealous when you went to that.
Somewhere around here too in the archives, I've got photos that you and I took and Ron Holman took when the SE racing team, came through Omaha on the tour in 1978. Got some killer shots of PK and Utterback at our trails that we rode at. So
standard trails, our jumping haunt.
Right. I've got to show those to him.
And you know what? That is what's so cool, because we'll talk about our roots in BMX and why we're worthy to do this, and why we think we're worthy, at least. And the thing is that was so cool because we go way back, and guys like that would stop in to see the Nebraska boys, Hayden and TJ and you and Gavin's and all the guys who were on the scene out racing the nationals and based out of Omaha. And you talked about Perry Kramer, PK. He said, I'm on, man. I'm going to be there. You know who else? Dennis Dane. Yeah, the Red Baron.
Yeah.
And Donnie Atherton. How many shows have you heard Donnie Atherton on? Probably none, right?
God, I don't think I've heard him either. I'm not sure I've heard Dennis Dane. I think he's done some though. But these are all guys that the material is just going to be amazing with these guys. And a lot of these guys have become really good friends over the years.
Yeah.
And but Donnie Atherton, I don't think I've heard him. So
I also talked to Greg Hill.
You were right there lining people up. What, did you have a checklist, and did they already sign their waivers?
I told them the next thing is lane assignments, where they're at in the gate, and
give them the ping pong balls in the milk jug.
They got to get their inspection sticker, and then we'll be able to get going. So it's
there you go.
Yeah, but absolutely. No, I talked, like I said, Greg Hill. I talked to Stu. I talked to Eddie King. I just went down the list, all the old school guys, and then we'll move into we're gonna. It's not just all super old, the guys who started it, but we're also gonna bring in some of the other guys too, because Tim, you and I raced and lived on the road. We did all the tours and all that through the late 70s and into the 80s. And then I dropped out and you kept going, man. You were racing before all the old school events. And I was saying, wow, he's still going out and racing.
Yeah. Like 30 years ago, we thought we were old, and, I'm still doing it. Not as often, but,
But you know what? These retro events like DirtyFest and Frogtown, and so many of them are popping up now, and it's so cool because DirtyFest. There you go, and it's so damn cool because you can go out not only like a reunion and see everyone, but gives you just a little bit of feeling of what BMX was like back in the day and back when we raced, before the roller pump tracks and stuff like that. And, the downhill tracks and all of that. And, one of the things that, we talked about why we wanted to start the podcast. We wanted to start it because we have so many stories to tell.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I mean, stories. And what comes part different when Tim and I were talking is that a lot of the guys who do the podcast, I would say 100% of the people that do podcasts are racers. They were there, they were racing, but we bring a whole different perspective to this because we were racers as AMs, then we were both pros, but then we both went to work for the American Bicycle Association. We worked on the magazine side doing Bicycles and Dirt, ABA Action, I'm totally going blank here, Tim. After we called, there you go, Bicycles and Dirt. Tim's holding up the issue right now with Mike Polson on the cover, Schwinn Rider.
Oh yeah.
But
Mike
Tim, what
Polson
was it
on the cover?
when we changed the name from ABA Action? What was it? It was ABA.
American BMXer? Were you there?
American BMXer. Thank you.
Yeah,
yes.
I was gone by then. Here's another good one.
There's the world's most famous cover. You've got to see this cover, and we will post a photo of this one, especially on our Instagram page. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you see it. And that Uncle Sam right there, that Uncle Sam, that sounds almost profane, doesn't it?
Okay.
That Uncle Sam, son of a, no, that son of a nation. That is Tim Lillethorup. And man, remember that, Tim, when we went and rented that outfit?
I wasn't down with this at all when it happened.
You what?
I wasn't really down with this when we
I know
did it.
you were almost mad. You were nervous. Like, I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to look good. And we were like, no, it looks so cool. We went out to Chandler to shoot that, didn't we?
Yeah, that was at Chandler on the big downhill drop away jump on the far straightaway. Yeah. And
now see, but totally, I could have never pulled that off because I'm short and you're tall and you looked more like a big, thin Uncle Sam. I would have looked like a short, fat Uncle Sam in that outfit.
Well, I mean, I've almost got the same look now, 40 years later.
You got the gray beard and
the beard and all that.
Yeah, but where's your top hat? And do you wear that every 4th of July and ride around the neighborhood on a BMX bike?
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? Oh, look at this. I mean, I don't know if everyone can see that, and we'll post it later. But if you look closely at the bike,
turn it just a little. You got a glare on it. There you go. Yeah.
The bike is worth thousands of dollars. It's a Hutch Pro Racer with fully kitted out with all the Hutch components. Yeah. It doesn't have Hutch cranks, but
right. I know.
Where is it now?
I know. Dude, we talked about this recently about that Hutch test bike that we had at Bicycles and Dirt. Oh, and the manufacturers back then would say, yeah, we don't want it back. Just go ahead and keep it. And so we'd race them. We'd do whatever. Well, that one, I somehow got, I don't even know how, but I got a hold of that bike. That thing had the Hutch hubs, Hutch cranks, Hutch everything, and it was a pro race. Yes. I mean, gosh, I wish I had that nowadays.
That was probably another one. I mean, Hutch would send us bikes. I had a cruiser and a 20, and then you had one too.
Yeah, so. I mean, that was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to stick on the same topic, but here's another magazine I pulled
at my parents' house
from your parents' garage.
That's my parents' garage, all our old bikes. Yeah. I just look around there and I go, I wish I had those bikes, I mean, and the dog was my sister's dog, Stu Thompson. Who's the young kid?
I don't know who that is.
I can't remember. I can't remember.
I don't think I was there when you did the shoot, but I recognize my toolbox up here with stickers all over, BMX stickers all over.
And there's another shot where there's a yellow tough wheel sticking into the frame. And I remember when I moved, I gave that bike away when I moved to California because I just didn't have room to take everything. And now I wish I had it because it was like I I think the frame was a Navajo Pro, and it had
Oh my
yellow
God, there's a
tufts
whole
on it.
story.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
not
one of our
Navajo. There's
stories.
another whole. That's
Yeah.
the stories. Okay, you talked about the ABA stories. That could fill
We'll film
several
many a
different.
show.
Yeah, that would be mini shows.
And that's the thing, everyone, that we're going to be able to bring you both sides of the coin, because as Tim said, and we're talking about why are we worthy to have our own BMX podcast? Well, as Tim said, we both worked at the magazine, but then he left. He left to start REACH BMX, the frame company with Woody, and of course I stayed with the company, and I became the vice president of ABA, and I built most of your national tracks along with Bill Starlin. So I was building tracks, I was helping run the company with Clayton John, and it was pretty interesting, and we saw every side of ABA, of BMX, from the sponsor side, from the race side. And boy, we're going to tell you stories from behind the curtain. Tim, how stiff are your hands from writing moto sheets?
I tell you what, I actually put it away yesterday. I have like 4 or 5 of those little blue pens. I think I posted one on Facebook a month or 2 ago. The blue pens with the ABA logo that there was a whole boxes of those pens in the sign-up trailer, and our hands would be numb from filling out moto sheets because there were no computers. We had a computer at the office that kept track of your points.
Right.
But it wasn't tied into the sign-up trailer. Everything from registration to motos to 16th mains, 8th mains, quarter mains, semi mains, main events, it was all done by hand. And if there was a mistake, you had to go back and redo it.
And so we were in there for hours writing moto
when you worked at ABA, it didn't matter if you were the photographer, okay, or the head scorekeeper or the marketing guy.
Yeah,
it was
we were in there doing moto sheets.
And we were all doing moto sheets.
And I want to dispel a rumor right now. Episode 1, here's a big rumor that's going to be dispelled right now. Tim can back me up on this. Everybody who raced, especially the pros, they would say to me, and they still do over the years, yeah, well, I remember at this race, they really stacked the moto on me, or something like that. No.
Yeah, how did we do that?
The way we did it was they came in, the women, usually the women or the guys, whoever was at the windows taking your money, they would take your order. They would take your order. It sounds like we're selling burgers. They would take your registration, and it just got set in a box at random, set in a box. We're in the back, and that was the most monotonous part of doing moto sheets, is that you might have a 16 expert. Okay, I'm going to go over and write that. And then the next sheet in your pile was a AA pro. You'd go over and write that. And then all of a sudden, oh, girls 12 and under. And so you were like walking back and forth, running into the other person that was in there with you. And it was totally rando. And
it was probably in the order of sign up.
The only difference was when Tim started racing pro again while he worked there, and he would go in and do the sheets, and he would always give himself an easy mode.
Well, actually, I had a little box around the back of the trailer where people underneath the rear tire, where people would throw $20 bills in there.
There you go. But
but no, didn't want it to be out in the open.
No, but there were never. That was totally random. And I know people don't believe that, especially because we would look sometimes. We'd be sitting there with Merle or with Gene Roden or Clayton or whoever it was over the years. And we'd look up and we go, wow, that is one stacked moto. Because it was totally at random. And we'd be like, oh, man, look at it. It's Thompson, it's Hill, it's both the Patterson brothers. You'd just be like, oh, man,
And the other moto is like random guys that just turned pro.
Exactly. It was like, I don't
know how they do it now, but it was, I don't ever remember anybody getting moved around. like,
No.
that moto's too
No, there
easy.
never was.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Right.
only time that would truly happen would be if we ever saw like multiple riders from the same team. Like if there was 3 red line riders, in the moto, we would try and, kind of move around because you don't want to, you don't want to do that.
You have a good memory.
It was.
You have a good memory. You have a good memory. I wouldn't have thought about how the motos were. I just remember writing all those damn names.
Oh man!
And I was usually so tired because, we'd be up building, especially if it was an indoor race, like in a rodeo arena. We'd be up till the wee hours of the morning building a track with rakes and shovels and maybe one piece of heavy equipment. And, it was like a 3-ring circus.
Well, Tim, do you remember
when you were working?
You said whether you were working at Gold Line or whether you were working in the office at something, everybody went out to the races. Not everyone, but a large part of the people, all of your district guys, that were your district representatives. They went out and helped run the race. A lot of the guys at Gold Line went out and helped. Right. But you, I, and Denny, we had to have had the hardest time because the whole thing was,
we didn't have 9-to-5 jobs.
No, we worked all week like everybody else, and we'd be on a deadline because we were producing ABA Action, Bicycles and Dirt, and Arizona BMXer. Remember that one? Did you forget about that?
Yeah. I
Plus,
tell you what,
we had to do all the ads for like everything else that we were doing. And we had to do all of the
oh my God. You're right.
Bird art. And
we'll talk about
well, let me finish that thought. So while we came back, everybody would take a day off. Like, half the guys would take Monday off, half would take Tuesday off. We'd have to come back and go right into a massive deadline where we worked 24 hours and we'd get done with it. And then we would come back and they'd go, all right, time to go to Reno or wherever we were going, and we'd be like, what?
I mean, honest to God, I think that contributed after like 3.5 years of this. I think that's why I finally just said, okay, enough is enough. Because putting that publication together, that was a full-time job for a whole department. And like you said, going out and running the races, traveling, there's a whole podcast we could do on the ABA airplane. And
we got to. ABA
and the
Scareways, man. I mean, we got to talk about ABA Scareways. Okay, here's some of
the top-notch pilots.
Oh my God. Tim,
that flew for ABA Airlines.
I am writing this down right now. Future episodes. We've got ABA Scareways.
Oh my gosh.
And
remember Hap?
Yes.
I don't remember what his first name was, but honest to God, his real last name was Hazard. Okay. So we just called him Hap Hazard.
Yes.
And that's how he flew, dude. That's how he flew that plane.
How about, and now we're not going to give you the details right now, but how about new employee initiation when Merle and Gene were still around? Do you remember at the rental cars?
Well, it had something to do with, racing rental cars through random cities.
Yes. So we got an episode we're going to talk about ABA
probably racing rental cars to the nearest Wendy's restaurant.
Oh, wait a minute! I just said don't give them all the details. See? No, that's what you get with a live podcast. But no, we'll go down. There are so many stories. Now, the only thing I think I worked one time 50 days, and I know you did the same. Straight weekends, everything, because of our deadlines at the magazine, putting on races, getting photo shoots done.
Hardly any sleep.
No.
I remember the first deadline I had when I moved. I had this dream where, okay, I get to move to Arizona. I'm going to race. I'm going to be at all the nationals. I can still race. Well, I never raced while I worked.
Disappeared real fast, didn't it?
That disappeared real fast. But the first deadline I had, I remember I didn't sleep for like two or three nights in a row. And I had a 68-page or 64-page newspaper spread out in front of me. I mean,
and people, if you've never done layouts back in the day, now everything's on a computer, but when we actually had art boards, you cannot imagine how you have to comprehend them because they're not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're laid out in page pagination, and that's an art form in itself. What's that?
On a drawing table, doesn't this drawing table bring back memories?
Oh yeah, yeah. Hey, do you remember what my nickname was back in the magazine layout days?
God, I don't.
You guys called me Elbows because I was always leaning on something. And what was the guy's name? Our art director. I can't remember his name.
Ed Copley.
Ed Copley. Ed used to call me Elbows because, and then Cheryl started calling me Elbows because I would lean on an art board, be looking at it, studying it, go to walk across the room, and there'd be like a BMX rider or a line of type that had wax on it stuck to my elbow. And they go, "Hey, Elbows, you got Stu Thompson stuck on your arm there, bud."
Yeah, we had to paste the photos down. Everything was pasted down with wax.
And after you left, and I had to, we started having the paper printed over in Glendale, California. And you remember, because you were still living with me at that time after you left. And remember, I used to have to jump on the plane. And in the summertime, I was so nervous because you've got these art boards that are held together with wax. And it's 120 degrees out. I'm getting on a plane. And then I'd get in a hot rental car in California and I'd have to get them over there. And then I'd sit there for like 2 hours or more, putting everything together and hoping I didn't leave some guy's points out, you know.
Yeah. We should do an episode
from Clayton, and he goes, "Brad, there's a whole line of points missing out of the new edition." I was like, "Uh-oh," you know. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah, we should do a podcast on the production of ABA Action.
Yeah.
Get into the details because I've got a lot of good stories.
That's the thing, Tim, is we saw it from a whole different perspective. What points meant to us and what points meant to everybody else was different. How about things such as the rivalry? You know, we thought it was great. We're going to do a magazine. And all of a sudden, Bob Osborne got mad at us because Merle decided to do a magazine. And, you know, all the things that happened behind
politics.
Yeah.
The politics of BMX, you know, which I don't talk about a lot because, you know.
You know what, though? It's part of our sport, and it really is. And if we do it in a fun way, I think it's a great way to bring a lot of the stuff there.
Yeah, so we've got good material there for sure. We should talk about how we met.
I think we could bring that and merge it right into our very first segment. We're going to be doing segments here, everyone, that from time to time you'll hear a segment. And one of our segments is called First Bike. And I think whenever we have a guest, we want to know what their first bike was. And I'm going to just kick it right off with Tim. What was your first bike ever? Your first BMX bike?
Well, I mean, going back a little further, my first bike ever was a 1966, I think, Schwinn Spider. Which was the cheap version of a Sears. It was a Sears Spider, which is the cheap version of a Schwinn Stingray. It looked like a Stingray. And, you know, so I had that bike all the way through until about 1972. And then we started jumping bikes on ramps in my driveway. And so we'd put motorcycle handlebars on the bikes. So that wasn't really an official, you know, BMX bike, but it was a BMX jumping bike.
Yeah.
But then from there, I got, I think it was my 13th birthday. I had that Graco, which is a shock bike.
That's when I met you.
Yeah, that's when you met me. I still had that. Might have been my 14th birthday, but it's like a Yamaha motorbike with shocks on the, you know, shock forks on the front, shocks on the back, 22-inch front wheel.
You still have it, don't you?
and I still have it. It's not restored, but I still have it. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to throw a photo up so everybody can see Tim's Graco moto bike.
Yeah.
And that's when I met Tim. My first bike was, my first bike, if you go way back, was a Huffy. Then I got a Schwinn Stingray. And I remember going to the swap meet with my dad, buying a frame, coming home, and he helped me strip the paint. And that was back in the days when you could still go to the Schwinn shop and get all the Schwinn primers, Schwinn paints, and they were lacquers. They were good stuff, man. And we painted that bike in my backyard, hanging from a tree. And well, we weren't hanging from a tree, just the bike frame was. And
maybe that's how you could get a better spray pattern.
Better flow that way. Yeah, no, but we painted that thing candy apple red, Schwinn candy apple red, and put some like 120 gauge wheels on it. And then I remember, now this will get into when we talk about Tim and I meeting for the first time, but I didn't always live in Omaha. I lived in San Diego, California, and was racing BMX at like the bike shop at El Cajon, Lakeside. I raced Rancho San Diego, which was one of my favorite tracks. And I even raced side hacks with Scott Breithop at Rancho. And then my dad came home one day and he said, "Hey, we're moving." I go, "Where?" And he goes, "Omaha, Nebraska." And I went, "What?" Ooh. And that was the end of my BMX career for a while. But
what's that, Dad?
Yeah. But at the time I was racing a Schwinn with box bars, with red line forks that are serial number 10, a moto mag on the front, and a 120 gauge on the back. And that was my trick racer before I bought my next bike, which I got actually for a Christmas present. And it was a Mongoose. Like so many others, it was a Mongoose. But for DirtyFest, I recreated my very first race bike. Tim gave me a huge help on that because I needed that 120 gauge spoke and that moto mag. I had the frame, I had the bars, I had the Ashtabula neck, I kept my original redline forks, but Tim was so cool and came to the table with a moto mag and a 120 gauge. And so if you saw me out at DirtyFest, that is damn near my original race bike. It's even got the original number.
Yeah. I was looking at the photos the other day that you sent me years ago.
Yeah.
Of you on that Schwinn. It looks exactly the same.
I know, it's the same bike, man.
Yeah.
But so my dad comes home, says we're moving to Nebraska. And I'm like, I don't even know where that is really. And so we moved there, and we moved there in February. So I started school, but our school was notoriously crowded, really hadn't met anyone. And when spring came, I broke out my BMX bike and my skateboard, and I would ride around the neighborhood, and nobody, till one day I saw some guys jumping from their driveway into their yard. And I was like, "Oh, some guys. They got shock bikes, but that's cool." And I just sat there across the street watching them. And you pick it up from there, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we did. I mean, that was our deal, man. I mean,
jumping tires.
What's that?
Jumping tires.
Was it tires that day?
It was tires that day. You had them instead of length, you had them stacked tall.
Right. And so we knew about BMX. We thought it was jumping, riding trails, jumping. I think I had seen Bicycle Motocross News newspaper. I think they had that at our junior high. And I knew what a mongoose was, and I knew what moto mags were, but I had never seen a mongoose with moto mags. And we're jumping, I probably hit the jump, turned around, was riding back toward the end of my driveway, and there's a kid with long blonde hair. It's this kid out there on a mongoose with moto mags. And we all looked at each other and went, who's that kid with moto mags? We thought it was another guy from the neighborhood, and it was him. It was Brad.
And I asked them, I go, can I jump with you guys? And they're like, sure. And I remember Tim told me later, he goes, we had the tires stacked pretty high and none of us could do it. And we thought, this kid's going to break his bike because he doesn't have any shocks. And
we would jump for distance, you know, like we'd lay out trash cans and jump 30 or 40 trash cans, and it was all distance. We knew nothing about, you know, a bunny hop in midair. And so Brad hit the jump and bunny hopped and tucked, and he was probably jumped about, you know, 7 or 8 feet higher than we'd ever jumped. And, you know, it was amazing.
And
so, I mean, that was it.
Friendship born at like
that was
14 that, you know, it's still going today, man.
If we had a crew that was like 3 or 4 or 5 tight friends before that happened, now there were 5 or 6, because from that moment on, we were inseparable.
Yeah. It was BMX, man. And then our dads were really cool because our dads helped us make sure that the first BMX track got going in Omaha.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Yeah, your dad talked with Bill's Bicycle Barn.
Yeah,
which was our bike shop, and you know, the whole thing just kind of snowballed. Before we knew it, we had
Spinnin Spokes going.
Yeah, we got our first track, Spinnin Spokes. We built it with a bunch of other kids.
By
and
hand?
Then you and I were by hand with rakes and shovels. There's probably some of my mother's rakes and shovels are probably still over
out there, yeah,
buried in the dirt somewhere. But you know, we were heading to nationals together, and you know.
And I will say the way I got into ABA was I was going to college out in Arizona, and Tim and I were roommates. And by this time, Tim had stuck with BMX. I had, you know, kind of retired and gotten into cars and everything like that, and was going to school. And Tim came home one day and he goes, hey, Brad, they're going to hire somebody at ABA. You should go in and interview. And I was going to school studying business, management, advertising, and photography because I thought I wanted to be a magazine editor. And so he came home and I had like I think I had like a quarter left before I graduated when I got the job offer to come into ABA and be what I wanted to be, because everybody told me before that, they said, well, you know, you'll probably start in the mailroom at a magazine, and maybe one of those days after a long time, you know.
Not in our department, you start right at the top.
Yeah, and we went right in, man, boom. And of course, you know, did everything else too. But no, it was awesome. And I appreciate that, Tim, because you put my name in the hat. And I remember I interviewed.
It was only a natural.
Well, yeah.
What?
I said I interviewed with Denny, and then I had to interview with George, who was Merle's brother, right?
George, Merle's brother-in-law, George.
Yeah.
Right.
And I came in, and I remember he was in his suit and tie, sitting on the desk with his arms crossed, and I thought, oh man, this guy's not going to hire me, you know. And I walked out, and he goes, just go wait up in the front lobby. And he said it just like that. And I thought, no, I'm not getting this job. Because one of the things he asked me is, he goes, I understand you're roommates with Tim Lillethorup. And I said, yeah. And he goes, And then I walked out to the lobby, and Denny came out and he goes, we're going to call you later. Okay. And I said, okay. I drove home. I was like, yeah, I didn't get that job. And I got a call later today that they were going to hire me. And you know what Denny told me years later? He didn't want to hire me, but George talked him into it.
Denny didn't want him to?
He didn't want me to get hired. And I said,
oh, great.
I said, why didn't you want to hire me? And, you know, because later on we'd become really good friends. And he goes, well, I just thought because you and Tim were roommates that you guys were just going to be, you know, screwing around all the time and we'd never get anything done, you know? And I was like, wow. Because I thought it was George who wouldn't want to hire me, you know? So,
oh man. Wow.
But it's weird.
The planets aligned. I mean, and who would have thought that I would get a job offer at ABA in Arizona at about the same time that your dad changed jobs and got transferred to Arizona.
I know.
I mean,
It worked out perfect.
That's the real, coincidence that worked out really, really well. And
I lived with you with your parents for a short time because my parents moved. Right. And
yeah, your parents moved to Arizona a few months before I did. So you came and lived with us.
Yep.
And then when we moved to Arizona, I lived with your parents for a few months until I found a place to live, or until they kicked me out. I don't know which one was.
I think they found you an apartment really quick. No, I mean, but
they probably found one after the first week. Here, we got 3 choices for you, Tim.
But we had this house in Arizona that I ended up buying, and we rented it for a while, and it was right next door to my parents' house. And I had a girlfriend who eventually became my wife, and Tim had one room, I had a room, she had a room. And she would get so upset with Tim because on the weekends, she would clean the house, and then Tim would come, and I kid you not, 20 BMXers, and they would all come back from a ride. They'd all be sweaty, and they would all bring their bikes in the house. And she would go, "Why do you bring your bikes in the house? Don't want them to get stolen." And they would all come in to get a glass of water, and they would take every glass out of the cabinets and get a glass of water, and then just leave them sitting on the counter. And then they'd go to ride some more. And Charlotte would be like, they come in, they bring their bikes in. And then the one that kind of put it over the top was the time when, I don't even remember, I think it was you and Grubbs down for the Winter Nationals at Chandler. And you were rebuilding your bikes in the living room, and Grubbs had put his chain on the carpet. The greasy.
Yeah, I think you did, yeah.
And she lost it.
Just blame me for it. I don't want him to watch this and get mad at me. That wasn't me. That was you.
It was funny though, because we look back on it now, and it was like, I mean, come on. First of all, it wasn't a palace. It was the first house ever, and it was like our couch had 2 bricks because the legs had broken off. Yeah, remember that? And I mean, we had, I don't know, it was just, all hand-me-down furniture. And I remember one time your mom and dad came to visit, and Charlotte said, his mom's mowing the lawn. And then the next day she goes, his mom is rehanging our drapes because she said they weren't done right. And I kid you not. My mom went out and bought because I probably didn't mow the yard. Well, we used to say, it's your turn. No, it's your turn. And then nobody's turn,
She bought one of those, it's like a weed whacker thing, a cutter blade on a handle that you swing. I still have it. It's hanging in my garage.
Oh, man. I remember we used to cut the front yard, but not the backyard. And that's what she went and did, because we'd be gone so long. We'd be gone shooting her on deadlines, and we'd be like, that's the last thing we want to do is go mow the damn lawn. But we had to mow the front lawn and keep the nice because it was next door to my parents' house. And otherwise, we had my dad to deal with, So, hey, Tim, you know what we should do to wrap this show out is we should do a little interview. We're not going to cover everything, but you interview me. I'll interview you just to let everybody know a little bit more about who we are, what we've done, not just in BMX, but in our careers, so they know where we're drawn from. And, you want me to start it off?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is the Tim Lillethorup interview. Take 1.
Oh, you're interviewing me. Okay.
I'm interviewing you.
So, you better have some good questions.
But no, it's the roots, the BMX. So, Tim, we already covered how we met, but we started racing. We would go to Lincoln. We had the rivalry with the guys in Lincoln. We had the guys, in Omaha, all our buddies. Then we had our jumping place. The teams had come through, but you had a nickname because as you started getting higher up in the ranks in the cruiser classes, and making your name on the national stage. What was that nickname that you had?
Okay, I think it's the Cruisin' Cornhusker.
I remembered it being the Nebraska Big Butt. That's not it? No.
It was actually Weed. People called me Weed too because I had that big.
Oh, you had that afro, dude. Yeah.
White guy afro,
But no, Cruisin' Cornhusker. Had it on your leathers, had everything, and everybody.
Yeah.
And I think nicknames like that are really one big thing is what made Merle and Gene Roden, recognize you and give you that job offer at ABA because you stuck out. You were the Cruisin' Cornhusker, Yeah. Now it was your performance on the track that made you, but that kind of set you apart.
Right. I mean, I tell people this, I mean, you have to stick out. You have to have a personality. And I don't think we sought that out as kids, but, it was just a natural thing. And, I put Cruisin' Cornhusker on the back of my jersey. I was riding for Powerlite. And so Bob Osborne mentioned me in BMX Action a few times and put my photo in the magazine. I found out later that's probably because I had a sponsor that was paying for ads in the magazine. Was part of it.
That helps.
That's always part of it. It's kind of like when Greg Grubbs got on Redline, he was in the magazines.
Yeah.
But
it helped that he was a stylish. It did help that he was a stylish jumper.
Oh yeah, I mean Greg,
and he was fast.
Stuck out like no one else. I mean, he had personality and charisma, and we'll get him on this show too.
Long hair.
Yeah, and an attitude.
Yeah, there was a lot. But okay, so let's talk about. We were trying to get to nationals. We were trying to go places, and I had my 71 El Camino, which was not the right vehicle to go cruising around the nation because it had a big built motor in it and everything. But you had the ideal vehicle, and man, we made a ton of trips in that. And it was as I remember it, was it a 71 Chevrolet van, C10?
I believe it was a 76 or 77. Okay. And it was a box van. It had been a delivery van that I bought. And, it was 1979 or
white
80,
with black bumpers.
Yeah, I was pretty bare bones. Didn't have air conditioning, didn't have windows in the back. But, my grandfather was a carpenter and he built his own motorhome. So here I thought, well, I can make this into a really cool.
I remember being in your garage trying to put carpet in that thing, man.
Yeah, we built bench seating, and I had the table with the metal posts where the table would drop down into a bed. We didn't have seats in there. When we traveled to races, we just sat in lawn chairs.
Yes, I remember that.
In the back. And
with a bunch of bikes piled in it.
You'd turn a corner and you'd lean into the wall. And
I remember going hold on to the sides. And
we took that van everywhere, man.
All of our BMX races, all of our trips in that van. Do you know what one story sticks out the most out of everything? And I think I know what you're going to think it is, but go ahead.
For you?
For me.
The story that sticks out. Yeah. We almost hit a deer once, but I think that was in my Buick.
That was in your Buick. We also had an old man in your Buick once too. Well, an old man's car, but that's a whole nother story.
Oh, ouch. That's a bad story. No, what?
Okay. So we were out at Westroads. We took your van out to Westroads.
Westroads, okay. Which is a shopping mall.
Yes, and you had a brand new cassette deck you had put in your van, and we were like, okay. So we went to whatever the music store was, and you bought a cassette. Do you remember what cassette you bought? Any recollection of this at all?
Oh my God, the Eagles.
It was something.
Waylon Jennings. No, Marshall Tucker Band.
No, you bought like Missing Persons or something like that. Okay.
Oh yeah, I still have that. Yeah.
And we got out to your van, you unwrapped it right away, put it in, and Waylon Jennings comes on. And we're like, what the heck? It was like either Waylon Jennings or Willie Nelson. And you eject it really quick and you go, what the? It says missing persons on the outside. The box was missing persons, but the music on it was like Willie Nelson. And I remember it just stuck in my head because I was just like, that was like one of the weirdest things ever. And we went back in, exchanged it, and we should have kept it because probably was worth money because it was like a mix-up, It's like records like that are worth money.
Oh, we exchanged it. Was I mad?
You were mad. You were like, I'm not going to go back in.
I used to get mad.
Wait in line, and you used to get mad all the time. Like I got lane 8. Oh, no, lane 8 sucks. I'm never going to, come on. I'm not going to get around that guy. And I'd slow down so Tim could get around me. That's what it was. Right, Tim?
Right.
No. So continue with the interview. So you went to work for ABA. Merle and Gene offered you a job, and we've covered that earlier in the show. But you were the editor of ABA Action. And how many years did you do that?
It was over a 3-year period, but I don't think it was 3 full years.
3, and let's just say 3-ish.
Yeah.
What was the best part of being the ABA Action editor?
Oh.
And Tim, this is a family show, so you can't talk about the females that worked in the art department.
No, I won't do that. The best part about it would be, traveling, seeing all those cities. I mean, we went
everywhere.
We were on the East Coast one week, the Northwest the next week. We ate at a lot of good restaurants.
Made it some bad ones.
We probably did. Just getting to know more about the industry, BMX industry, and traveling. I kind of got burned out. After a while, I thought, well, this isn't what I want to do. I want to race. I mean, I always had that in the back of my mind. It's like, why am I doing this when I still want to race? I'm still in my early 20s. I want to be a pro. I want to race. And that's kind of part of the mindset that's hard to it's hard to turn that off. You know what I mean?
Well, I think the difference was you and I both, we never had big factory backing. And so it was always a struggle to get to every national. It was like, what can we do? And if you had a part-time job or something, you almost had to quit your job just to go to a national. I think you quit a job to go to the Rondo Classic, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
That's what I remember. You quit your job to go to the Rondo Classic because they wouldn't give you the time off. And you go,
I worked at Chris Hayden and I both. We worked at Valentino's, which is a pizza restaurant. And it's a pretty good job and everything, but they never wanted to give us weekends off. Well, the hell with that. That doesn't work. Races are on the weekend, man.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
And you had to leave early because we had to drive to them. So it was like, I remember you even remember the actual race. I remember quitting, but I don't remember which race I quit for. I just remember because I wanted to go to the Rondo Classic. You guys quit working at Valentino's to go, and I worked at Godfather's Pizza, and I was like, I need this job, man, and it was
somewhere around here too. I mean, I got my picture in BMX Action on that race.
And everyone, you've got to check this out on our YouTube feed also, because you can actually see the stuff that's behind us. And like with Tim, he's proudly displaying a lot of his recent awards from like DirtyFest and Frogtown. And he's got his number plates. He's got the bike that I'm going to talk him out of one of these days, which is that yellow Webco. And that monoshock. I love that bike. And, it's really cool. But so you had your van, you worked at ABA, but then one day you kind of said, that's it. I'm going to do something else. And you and Woody conspired and put up 2 things big that I remember, Tim, was you started the bike company and went to work for Woodward. Because at Woodward, you could do both. You could work and race.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me talk about REACH BMX Systems,
Go for
which
it.
was our company first, because this goes back even further. When we were taking classes at University of Nebraska here in Omaha, you and I remember specifically, we were sitting in the parking lot waiting for a class, and we were talking about starting a BMX company.
Yep.
And that's something that, as kids, that's what we wanted to do. So that was always in the back of my mind.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Do you remember, my dad actually reminded me of this when my dad was still alive. He said, I don't know why you and Tim never started the bike shop. And I go, what do you mean the bike shop? And he goes, Galen and I talked once about financing you guys start a bike shop in Omaha. And for some reason, you guys didn't want to do it. And I was like, I don't remember that. Do you remember that?
Oh, maybe vaguely, but
I think we were so into racing. We were like, why do we want to have a bike shop? We just want to race.
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that just knowing both of our dads.
Yeah. They were thinking we were just going to be on the road racing BMX our whole lives,
Right.
But I'm sorry, I interrupted. Right. So you were going on about REACH.
Okay, yeah. So REACH. So, I mean, I was getting burned out of all the hours working at ABA, pumping out the magazine, the newspaper, the travel. I still wanted to race. And on the weekends, I did race. I raced at Chandler BMX, which is one of the oldest tracks in the country. It's still going strong. And, that was my local track. So I met a lot of the riders, including Woody Woodruff. And, Woody's an inventor, a fabricator. Even at a young age, he was designing parts, but he designed that frame. Okay. And he wanted to start a company, and he knew that I knew marketing stuff. And we became friends, and we decided we'd start that company together. So that's what we did. I didn't realize that to start a company, you have to have money. I mean, that's what obstacle is that?
I just remember Woody got you a team van like the first week, man.
Woody's team van?
Yeah. I remember like the first week you guys were in business. Yeah. Woody comes pulling up to Chandler BMX because I was still racing once in a while on Wednesday nights, and there's this brand new team van all painted up, and I'm like,
the Toyota van. It was sweet. Yeah. No, that wasn't the first day of business. That was after our first sale of frames.
Oh, okay. First sale of frames. Okay.
And we were co-signers on the checking account.
Yeah.
I'm like, he goes, that's really cool van, Woody. That's really awesome. He goes, yeah, we bought that. And I'm like, we bought that? What did we do?
Gosh.
But anyway, so that's, it's a cool frame. It still is a cool frame.
People still love that frame. They remember it. And, it was part of BMX heritage for sure. I mean, you still have one, don't you?
I do not still have one.
Really? So, okay. This is what podcasts are great for. If anyone is out there and they want to donate one to Tim's collection, shouldn't the founder of REACH BMX have a original REACH frame? I think so.
I think so too.
But
actually, there's like 3 of them in town here. I know where they're at.
Better yet, you could send it to me and I'll sell it to Tim.
There you go.
No, was that fair? Does that sound fair? No. So Tim, I think the thing, because we're just trying to skip a stone across the lake here and give a little bit of our backgrounds, because people extract more and more on every week of the show. But the one thing was that you never wavered. You kept with BMX. You were out there racing. And I got to be honest, at times when I thought Tim shouldn't be racing anymore, man, like when you broke your shoulder and you broke your collarbone and you had some of your injuries, and I was like, man, because I remember I quit racing and didn't think I would ever race again. I think it was 80. It was in the early 80s. I don't know
82 or 83.
Yeah. When I broke my elbows out at Chandler, and,
right.
that was kind of the end of my career. But you never wavered.
You were like this for several weeks with casts on both arms.
I know, it was miserable. You find out who your friends are, buddy, when you have two broken arms. So that was terrible. And what was worse was you were out of town. Usually we were out there at Chandler together. It was like, didn't they race on Wednesday nights? Was that what it was? Wednesday nights or Thursday nights?
Am I out of town, or did I have to come rescue you? I can't
remember.
No,
you were out of town because I had my dad's Impala station wagon. And
you had my Cause Cruiser. You crashed on my
I had your Cause Cruiser, and I remember I was so
I'm
happy.
smiling. I shouldn't be smiling.
Oh, no, I was so happy that I had my dad's station wagon because it had power steering and I couldn't move. I had to drive home with just my thumbs, and it was like,
oh my God.
It still hurt, but I got home and my mom and dad took me to the hospital and I found out I had 2 broken elbows, a dislocated thumb, and a cracked palm. And why? Because on the double jump at Chandler, I didn't tuck. I didn't tuck and roll. I just stuck my arms out. Knew I wasn't supposed to, but I did. So
you probably clipped your front wheel on the lip of the step-up jump.
Right as I was coming off, I slipped a pedal, and boom, front wheel right into the second jump and over the bars. But anyways, but we're talking about you. So, you never wavered. You kept it up. And I think that's a big reason why at DirtyFest and all these, you're raking it in, dude. You are getting firsts and multiple firsts, and not only on the track, but out in the show area too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's the whole vintage BMX movement. I mean, it started at Frogtown a year or two before DirtyFest.
Yeah, exactly.
And but we've had DirtyFest now twice, and I used to dream about this. My dreams were, I told you this story last year at DirtyFest. I would have dreams about riding on vintage style downhill dirt tracks, which is the way we used to race. And, these guys had the vision to have these events. They're on old school dirt downhill tracks built like the way they were in the 70s and 80s. Maybe one jump per straightaway. You got plenty of time to set up for the jumps. If you crash, you're crashing in dirt. You're not crashing on asphalt. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Well, but to have the vision to create this, and it's not only the tracks, it's the whole vibe.
Yes.
It feels like it did when we were, 15 years old.
Other than the jerseys fitting much too tight on the guys who wear their old jerseys, other than that, it's perfect.
Other than that, right. But it's the whole vibe. It's a reunion. You and I have both been to DirtyFest now twice together. It's a reunion. It's kind of a party. It's like a high school reunion for people who don't go to their high school reunions as much because BMX was what they were into.
Yeah, they weren't in high school. I mean, and the thing is, you said the vision, there's a difference. Todd, who does Frogtown, Eric, James, and Miranda, all those guys, they have the follow through. They didn't just think how cool it would be. They actually did it. And we all benefit from that. And is there anything else you want to bring up on your interview right now, Tim, that you think needs to be mentioned?
Oh gosh, not for now. I mean, we have plenty of time to get into the more detail on different things because as we talk, I've got a whole library of stories going on in my head, of each of these topics. And it would take hours right now, but
well, that's what this show's about, and that's what it's going to be. Is we'll bring in guests, we'll bring in other people, and we're not going to just bring in racers. We're going to bring in some of the guys that worked at companies. We're going to bring in some of the people that we might even reach out, get guys like Gork, and find out what's happening at the BMX Hall of Fame. And
oh my God, the Hall of Fame. You got to visit that Hall of Fame. It's incredible down in Tulsa. But
I'm going to visit when we're inducted, Tim. I mean,
oh yeah. in the year 2055.
Yeah, when we're dead, posthumously inducted. Hey, so go
And
ahead.
I want to
Turn
talk
the
about
tables.
you.
Turn the tables.
Let's talk about you. We need to talk about you because we got some catching up here to do. So we moved to Arizona together. I got the job at ABA first. You came on board, and take us from there. What happened? Where did your life go through ABA and beyond?
Well, ABA,
Because you've got a lot to say.
I've got to say, ABA, I'm an admitted car addict. I mean, I have always loved cars almost as much as I like BMX, and I look back at BMX as being the very first chance to customize and race and go fast and have that freedom was the BMX. Then as I got into the cars, I got to do that with my Chevelle, my El Camino, and all the other cars I've owned. But I never knew where that would take me. And ABA was such a stepping stone because, number one, I met so many people that became lifelong friends and that I can see today, whether it's online or at events, and call them friends that I've known since I was like guys like Bob Harrow, who, Bob and I have become really, really good friends. And I've known him since we were like 15, and when you know people like that and for such a long time, you have so much heritage and so much to go on. But when I look back at ABA, Tim, do you remember how we used to go to nationals and like the Mears brothers, who were IndyCar drivers, would bring their kids out to the races, and there were hot rodders and there were drag boat racers and, so many other people that you could have this kind of meshing, and Merle, he wasn't a hardcore car guy, but he always liked to have a nice car. And Denny always liked cars. And
Denny loved cars. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so all of that.
Denny had an El Camino. That's right.
He did. Yeah. That's 77, man. I bought that from him eventually. And it was just such a great launching pad. Not to mention was where I met Brad Dorfman, the founder of Vision Streetwear. And he, I had met him through Everett Rosecrans and went over to see him, met him, got to know him really well. Vision was growing like a weed. And it was one of those things where I talked him into sponsoring the Grands. We came back from the Grands and he called me and he goes, "You going to be at ASR?" And I said, "I am." Excuse me, not ASR, Interbike. And I go, "I am." And I met with Brad at Interbike. And I remember him coming up to me and going, "Hey, I need somebody just like you at Vision. Somebody that knows action sports, knows business, knows all this." He goes, "My company's growing like crazy and I really need to partner up with somebody." And I was like, "Well, what about me?" And he goes, "You're the vice president of ABA. Would you want to leave there?" And I was like, it never even dawned on me about that. I just went, because Vision was such a cool company and it was growing so fast. And like you said, Tim, you get a little burnout after doing national after national after national. And, you come home blowing your nose and it comes out brown and, from all the dirt and everything. And it's not one of those things where you feel like you're a pro and you're going chasing that number one title. It's, okay, I'm going to another national. Okay, my wife wants to know, can we go to see her relatives? And I go, "No, that's Thanksgiving weekend," because I literally, my roommate, Steve, who from Omaha and then came down and became my roommate after you were there. My parents for years would go, "Do you remember that one Thanksgiving where such and such happened, or your uncle so-and-so came by?" I go, Yeah, that was Steve. I was in Oklahoma for the Nationals, and they would have
yeah, I mean,
family stories that
absolutely.
was not part of, or how about that Easter, or how about this,
Yeah,
and
I look at some of the people I know that have worked at ABA for 20, 30, 40 years, and
oh,
I don't even know if they know what Thanksgiving is.
right. And so anyways, Brad made me the offer. I jumped at the chance, moved to California, and became the big part of the company, everything from the working with banks and the business side all the way down to teams, and put together, whatever it had started with the BMX, part, and grew that. And we just did so many great things there. And then from there, we got to the point where, and I'll have to tell this story on another episode, but when the decision to sell Vision came up, and why it came up, and it was that happened, and I was like, gosh, it's almost like being on a treadmill and you get off and you go, now what do I do? But I had a little bit of downtime, and
when Vision was sold, I mean, you didn't go with it, or it was like,
no,
is that when you left, or
we sold divisions. So we had like our European division, our
Right.
Asian division, and we sold those divisions and then pared down the US company greatly. And I could have stayed, but I decided, again, it was time for a change. And it was probably one of the greatest things I ever did, because I had met Boyd Coddington, the world famous hot rod builder. He was super small. His whole entire company, hot rods, wheels, everything, was like a $500,000 a year company. Took some of the money I made at Vision, went in, invested in his company, and 5 years later, we were a public company on NASDAQ that I did, and we had became the most influential hot rod company ever. And then from there, I've had lots of companies, had a lot of success, and I've been real fortunate, but I always go back to my BMX roots. And I always think, if I hadn't have been a BMX racer, I wouldn't have met Brad and hadn't have partnered up with him on Vision. If I hadn't have been at Vision, I wouldn't have met Boyd. And if I hadn't have met Boyd, I wouldn't have taken that company public and then gone on to start my own wheel company and watch company and apparel company and all the other stuff.
And if you hadn't ridden your mongoose up in front of my driveway, you wouldn't have met me, and we wouldn't have moved to Arizona.
You wouldn't have recommended me for the job at ABA. See, it's the butterfly effect, Tim. Butterfly effect in real life. And it's all totally because of BMX. And if I go back one other step, if I hadn't become a BMX racer, I would have fallen in with the wrong crowd in that neighborhood, and
you would have been smoking pot at the high school.
Hanging down at Sunny Slope at the park down there where those guys,
the rocket ship park, man.
I was just gonna say the rocket ship. Yeah. We were off building jumps and jumping, and I remember some kid asked me once, goes, "Hey man, you want a cigarette?" And I went, "No, I don't smoke. I race BMX." I wanted to, stay in good condition. And but that's it.
We could have a whole episode on some of the people we knew from the neighborhood, like
exactly, and
like Chris's cousin John Wilfong, and
oh god,
all the I shouldn't say it. He might be watching. I don't think so, but the ne'er-do-wells, or just the characters. What was the guy that lived down by? We talked about.
How about Boren? How about Tim Boren? He was a BMXer, but he was also a living on the edge, man.
Man, he's in our Hall of Fame. He's in our Nebraska Hall of Fame.
No, he's a good guy. But you know what sticks out the most with Boren and me? Do you remember we were down by where later it would become Gnarlsbad BMX track, and they had dug some 8-foot deep pit because they were going to put a 7-Eleven in there or something, and it was like 10 feet wide. And Boren goes, "I can bunny hop that." And we're like, "No, you can't."
Oh my god! No, that was over by your house, dude. That was
somewhere
by,
right in. Yeah,
it was. Remember where where Dorothy lived?
Yeah,
Charlotte's mom had that apartment by Morton Jr. It was that lot.
Was it over there? Okay,
by Fort Street. where the off ramp came off, just
Yeah.
down the street from your house. And we were there, and he's like, "Man, I'm going to jump
behind
into
that church. You're right. It was. I can bunny hop that.
I can bunny hop that, man." He bunny hops. I don't know. Somehow he just did a nosedive straight down into a 10-foot
Well,
pit.
he got like halfway over it and realized, losing altitude. Man, right into the pit. I mean,
Oh my God. Oh my God, the stories. No, the other guy was Ren Cotton Gin.
Oh God, Ren Cotton Gin. Had his fort. Remember, he had his fort in that field.
He had the fort. That's right. When you said digging the pit, I thought it was Ren Cotton Gin.
You know what I remember about Ren Cotton Gin, and we're really getting off the track for our listeners, but
off track, man.
I had an R&R, and if anybody had an R&R, they know that they were super light, great race bikes, but those 2-rail R&Rs were pretty fragile, and
they all broke.
Ren asked me, "Hey man, can I ride your BMX bike?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he went down the street and like found the biggest curb he could, came off that curb and landed flat right in the street. And I heard my frame break and I went, "Oh man." You
had Moto mags on it, didn't you?
No, I had those blue Arias, the lightweight gauge with like Susie Hubs.
I didn't know he broke. All I remember about
the one who broke my bike.
Ren Cotton. So he was one of those kids that like you're in 5th grade or whatever, and he looked like he was like 18.
Yeah, had a beard. Yeah, I know. But I remember I went home and I was so mad, and I said to my mom, and she goes, "Well, who let him ride it?" And I said, "I did." And she goes, "Then it's not his fault, is it?" And I said, "You're right. You're right." Learning lesson. So,
words of wisdom from Rita.
That's right. Hey, we should wrap this episode up. We're having so much fun. So. But
I think so.
It's just a look of things to come. And I want to remind everybody, Super Rad BMX, go to it on Instagram, subscribe. We're going to be putting up some old school photos of ours. We're going to be putting up things we talk about on the show, like that cover of Tim on the Uncle Sam issue of Bicycles and Dirt. We'll post that up there. We're going to have some shots. I think in one of my books, I have a shot of Ren Cotton Gin going into that pit. And it might be a little blurry and out of focus, but we're going to have some really cool stuff. I also want to tell you, you have to follow us on iTunes podcast. I cannot tell you, click that button, take the time. I know it's kind of a hassle sometimes because I've done it. But give us a 5-star rating and just leave a comment like BMX is rad or the show's rad. It doesn't have to be a big, long comment. 3 words, and then Apple says, "Oh, they got a comment." If you just put great or a thumbs up, doesn't work. So it's really important. Tim, what did you have to say?
Oh, I just wanted to say on future episodes, we can talk about stuff like this.
Slides.
We didn't. Yeah. So,
we both have archives.
Photos. We both have massive archives of photos. These were taken probably within weeks after Brad moved into my neighborhood. So we can talk about that. We can
talk about our bike archives, our parts archives, sticker archives, all kinds of cool stuff.
Right.
And we'll put it all up. So as I said, follow us at Super Rad BMX on Instagram. You can do that right away. And you can follow Tim on Instagram at Radmatic. That's Radmatic. You can also follow him on YouTube at Radmatic. And you can follow me on 2 places. Follow me on Instagram at Win Brad's Stuff. I do sell a lot of my collectibles on there, but I post just tons of cool BMX stuff. And you can follow me personally at Bradley_Fanshaw, where if you want to see stuff about my cars and everything else I do around with rock stars and movie stars and BMX stars. Tim, we didn't even talk about the NBA Racers reunion that I went to. We'll have to talk about that on the next episode.
Yeah, we can save that for the next episode. There's so much we can talk about.
Be the motto of the show. We forgot more than we talked about.
It is the motto of the show. It usually is, because as soon as we end this, we're going to think of all these other great memories. But we have all these wonderful people coming up that we've talked about at the beginning of the episode. So we're excited. We're excited to have you tune in, and thrilled to have this Super Rad BMX launched today.
That's right. Today was the launch, and we will be back. And that's a promise, not a threat.
This is the Super Rad BMX Podcast. Down the first straight is the cruising cornhusker over the jump on